Somebody needs to call Mushroom Kingdom PETA on Mario because he's just abusing the hell out of this species to get his work just done, just throwing them in places, throwing them off cliffs, beating them in the back of the head so they'll eat things. Who knows if they actually want to eat those things and spit fire? Maybe Mario's a monster.
Super Mario World came out almost 30 years ago, yet is able to compete with modern platformers as it showcased what video games were capable of in the early 90s. Released in Japan in 1990 and then in North America 1 year later, it's incredible to think this game was included as a pack-in title with the Super Nintendo, so you bought the console and you got this incredible game. Is this one of the best games to be included with a console at launch? Let's talk about this iconic video game on another episode of A Cast of the Past, where you can check out a brand new episode each and every Sunday talking about our favorite video games, movies, and much, much more from the 90s, 2000s, and beyond. My name is Juan Velez. I am from Puerto Rico. Joining me, we have Ryan McNulty from Boston, Massachusetts. Ryan, considering the fact that the Super Nintendo is arguably one of the best consoles of all time, tie that in with Super Mario World being included, is that the best 2-1 punch scenario? The best pack-in title?
You know, the Super Nintendo had a lot of good titles, and it also had a different bundle that you could get for the Super Nintendo. Granted, it wasn't released till later, where you got Donkey Kong Country with the Super Nintendo. Me personally, I would argue that that was a better pack-in game for the console, but you can't go wrong with Super Mario World. You can't go wrong at all.
How crazy is it that two of the console's best games were at one point or another the pack-in title? But back on the podcast from London, Ontario, ladies and gentlemen, give us a round of applause. Actually, no, because it's going to mess up the audio. But we have Keith Poshik. Keith, I got the biggest question for you, man.
Okay.
Why should people play this game in 2019 and beyond?
Because it's one of the best video games ever created. And the thing that really sets Super Mario World apart is you can play it today and it just feels so good. I think that's what separates it from everything else, where you have games that maybe don't hold up, like the inferior pack-in title for the Super Nintendo, Donkey Kong Country, that the platforming of it all just feels so good, and it's just got this fun factor. Like, I've been playing Super Mario Maker 2 recently, and there's been a few times where I was just going back and forth, and I kind of forgot which game I was playing, even though I've beaten the Super Mario World levels hundreds of times. Just the fact that it feels so good, and it feels like a game that comes out in 2019 just shows how well this game has held up throughout the test of time. It might be the best video game ever.
Why do you think the Super Nintendo was such a great home for platformers? Because you have this game, but then you have the Donkey Kong games, you have games like Earthworm Jim, the lesser-known platformers, but there's something about that console that I think we can talk about this in 2050, and even then, you can still pick up maybe a Super Nintendo Classic version 2.0 or something, and these games are just a blast to play, and maybe not so much for other genres. What do you guys think that is?
I think it's more the limitations of the console itself that just made platformers a perfect fit. It's almost, you could almost answer the same question of why platformers never really took, except for a few examples once things moved to 3D, where you've got all these great examples of platformers like you mentioned that just didn't make the cut except for the very elite few. A platformer on a 2D console is just a perfect fit because it's the best way to create a engaging environmental experience while having the limitations of being on a two-dimensional plane. It just kind of fits well, and it took a really long time for 3D to catch up on that, and just Super Mario World is the gold star example of that. It's the Kota Ibushi of platformers.
Not everyone will get that reference, but the thing was, obviously we had the Super Mario games on the NES that really revolutionized platforming and defined the genre, and then you have Super Nintendo, which was really the pinnacle of 2D gaming, and naturally platformers evolved with that, and it's just you had more capabilities. The power of the Super Nintendo versus the NES, you were able to really better capture kind of the a more sophisticated platformer where things like momentum and stuff played a larger part, and just kind of smoother mechanics overall, tighter controls with the Super Nintendo controller. It still feels nicely in your hand to this day. So it was just really what the NES really brought to the table. The Super Nintendo really just did this really refined version of platforming, and I mean, to this day, where you have like Steam 2D platformers, they still very much have that Super Nintendo feel to them.
For better or worse, yes.
Yeah, exactly. And for those that don't know, so at launch, the Super Nintendo came, at least in North America, with this game, Super Mario World, but then you could also buy F-Zero, Pilot Wings, SimCity, and Gradius 3. So I think that
God.
Super Mario World and F-Zero alone...
ridiculous.
Yeah,
like
that's
two of the best games ever.
Yep.
Maybe 3. You could maybe make a case for 3 came with the Super Nintendo.
So that's just great to think about. And then when you think about Super Nintendo versus Sega Genesis, were you guys fans of Sega consoles? Did you experience them? Because I feel when we talk about this iconic video game, I think maybe playing or not playing Sega games definitely is a factor we should consider.
I never owned a Sega Genesis. To this day, I have never owned a Sega Genesis. I just
played Genesis games at some point.
I've played Genesis games. It's Sega has been great at curating their Genesis catalog through like collections and stuff. So I've gone back and played a lot of it then, but I was always a Nintendo kid, and I never really saw the reason to go and play the Genesis games, because in my opinion, I had the better console. I didn't buy into that whole Sega does what Nintendo don't marketing stuff. I was a Nintendo fanboy through and through.
Keith, you didn't know there was blast processing on the Genesis?
Let me show you where you can stick blast processing.
I was also a Nintendo kid. Yeah, I was a Nintendo kid. I did play a little bit of Genesis here and there at friends' houses growing up, but much like Keith, it wasn't until years later with the collections and stuff that I got to play a lot of those Genesis games. So I was Nintendo through and through.
Yeah, same here. I think that the first time that I played a Sega Genesis was actually in Venezuela, which is a super weird scenario to think about. I went to a video game store there, and I played it in a movie theater-sized screen, and I played, I think it was Sonic the Hedgehog 1. But then it wasn't up until like maybe a Sega collection on the PS2 that I got to play some Sega Genesis games. But then going back to the Super Nintendo, was Super Mario World the first game that you guys played for the console? Or if not, which one was it?
It probably was. It's really tough to think that far back. When I got the system, that was probably the only game I had, so I played a lot of it then, but I definitely played Super Nintendo before I actually owned it. I'm guessing Super Mario World is what I played first, but I mean, we're talking quite a ways back now.
Yeah, I think so. I can't honestly remember. It was either Super Mario World or A Link to the Past was the first game I played on the SNES, so really... boo-hoo to me, it was one of the best games versus another one of the best games.
So I'm going to throw a question out there. I'm really curious to see the response because we have so many Mario games from NES all up until Super Mario Odyssey on the Nintendo Switch. Thinking about Super Mario World, would you say this is the best Super Mario game, including 2D and 3D? We're just throwing out the franchise as a whole. Would you say this is the best one? And if not, which would be your number one pick? And this is strictly personal. We're not talking about review scores. We're not talking about
so this is not objective.
Community. This is about
this
is about you, Ryan. Be completely egotistical about this.
All right. So I've thought a lot about this actually, because growing up and through most of my life, I would say that this was my favorite Mario game. I put the most hours into this. I spent summers replaying this game, and I loved it a lot. Having now gone back and replayed it recently along with Mario 64, it's a lot closer than I thought. Kind of going back to it, I didn't fall in love with it all over again like I expected myself to. And when I've recently played Mario 64, I was a lot more impressed with, man, like I used to kind of, back once we got to like GameCube era, I used to think back to Mario 64 and think it was like super archaic, especially even in comparison to a game like Banjo-Kazooie, which I thought kind of evolved off of Mario 64. But going back and playing Mario 64 about a year ago, I was very impressed with how amazing Mario controls, and I love just even taking that whole momentum concept to a whole new level and all the wall kicks and everything that you can do. It's so amazing, like the different ways you can solve puzzles and do things. So Mario 64 might actually be my favorite, just in terms of atmosphere and just controlling Mario just being super fun. And although I think Super Mario World is a fantastic game, going back and replaying it, like I said, I didn't fall in love with it all over again like I expected myself to.
So a question for both, and Keith, you recently have been playing Super Mario Maker, so have I. When you guys think about Super Mario, do you prefer it because of A, platforming, or B, the puzzle elements? Because I feel there's definitely two sides of the spectrum, and Ryan, you're talking about Super Mario 64. What I loved about that game is exactly that. It's the movement and just being able to explore the world, and the fact that there is some puzzle elements, but I just love to being able to walk around there. I've been playing Super Mario Maker, but for me, my favorite levels aren't those super challenging ones that I gotta break my head. I like the idea of a well-designed level that allows me to explore and feel like I'm progressing, but that is not relentless. So which of the side of the fence are you guys on?
I'm definitely on the puzzle side of the fence because I had the opposite experience of Ryan, and I fell in love with this game again as I went back and played it. And as I've been thinking about what exactly I fell in love with, it was those levels that had the puzzle element to it where, yes, you can go to the end of it and just clear it like a normal level, at least for the beginning of the game. But once you start throwing in those extra pieces, like going to find those block worlds and then getting the keys and unlocking the alternative routes where you can skip things, that's the part of it that I love the most. It's really just taking that platformer formula and kind of like turning it on its head and doing something completely new, especially for the time. That's what makes this game so great, that there's not just one set path, and it's that puzzle stuff that makes it happen. And to go back to Super Mario Maker, that's my favorite type of level in there as well, where it's not just like, oh, it's not just this fine set of jumps. It's where you have to actually use your brain and make sure that you can get the jump properly. Those are my favorite levels there. So I think I lean just in general over to the puzzle side.
So I think... go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I wouldn't say I'm too married to one or the other, because I do like those levels where you just really get into the flow of the level and you're just going through every obstacle. But then I can also appreciate the puzzles and finding the alternative routes, which is a huge part of this game. So I really like both.
So having played Mario Maker recently, in your case, Ryan, you played Super Mario 64. How do you think the difficulty played into Super Mario World, going back to it? Because honestly, one thing for me, I love platformers, but I'll be real, I'm pretty bad at them. So let's just say I died a couple times more than I should have. But when I went to the forest world and all those places that you got to go back to get the different, exits and things like that, and you start dying and dying, my first thought process was, I forgot how difficult this game was. So did you guys feel a sense of difficulty going in? And is that something you like, or would you prefer something maybe a little bit lighter?
This game kind of throws you off a cliff at some point, depending on the path you take. It's somewhere around the forest or that chocolate area beneath it where you get the feeling like, okay, yeah, I'm pretty good at this game. I got that Mario flow going, and then it just throws you off of that cliff. Like, no, you're in it now. You're in the real Mario, and it gets really, really hard. I was shocked by how difficult it was, and like you, Juan, like I like to think I'm decent at these 2D platformers, but I got my butt handed to me somewhere around the Forest of Illusion, and really, like, before I got there, I would just run through the levels and try and beat it as fast as I can. once I got to that point, I really had to slow down, think about jumps, accept losses, and like relearn these levels just to get through them, because it gets really hard.
Yeah, I certainly had more patience as a kid and got probably less frustrated. I definitely died a lot, but I think at the end of the day, one of the reasons, and being completely honest with myself, that I probably liked this Mario game best growing up over, Super Mario Brothers 1 through 3 was because I was able to beat it. I think it's easier than the NES predecessors, and a big reason being, of course, that you can save, right? And that makes a ton of difference there. So it was really probably for many people the first Mario game that they could beat and feel like they accomplished something. So probably a lot of that is a big reason why I grew more attached to that than maybe some of the more old school people that grew up playing Super Mario 3, and they hail that as, the best of the 2D Marios.
That's a conflict that I've been having, because as I kept playing this game, I think that I go back to Super Mario Brothers 3 a lot more than this one. I feel like World, because it was my first Mario game where I really sat down and played an extensive amount of, as opposed to 3, where I feel I always played the first 5 levels and called it a day.
Once you got a game over, you were like,
yeah,
I'm out.
Exactly. And agree or disagree, for me, 3 is more important in the context of video game history, because without 3, and it's not just because it's the previous Mario game, but 3 is so incredible. Think about that. That's NES. We're going to the previous console, and think about how amazing it is.
If we are talking about, if we were grading Mario games on kind of how they evolved the genre, then Super Mario World may honestly be the one that evolved the least of almost any Mario. Super Mario 3 versus, because you can kind of throw out 2 because it's a really complicated scenario. But if you look at the difference between Super Mario 1 and Super Mario 3, it is ridiculous how much they evolved. And then Super Mario World is definitely more refined in some ways, and you can save, and you got Ghost House and alternate paths. But I mean, there was a lot of those kind of things in Mario 3 with skipping worlds and things like that. And then you go to 3D with Mario 64. So there's... if we're talking about how the series evolved, I wouldn't say Super Mario World evolved the series much, but it is just a very tight, solid game.
See, I disagree with that, where I think that a lot did change with Super Mario World, because yes, you had those little those skips and stuff in Super Mario 3, but every level was still start at the left side, get to the right side, and it was just about how you got to the right side that was different. And they didn't do that in Super Mario World. Like, there are parts in that game, especially in like the ghost houses, where you will fail if that is your objective, to just go from left to right. And they kind of touched on it with the flute in 3, but I think World is really the first time that they really branched out with the branching paths. Like, if you want to talk about one of the like biggest influences and biggest like leaps in the Super Mario series, I think the Star World is exactly that in Super Mario World. How all of a sudden you've got this hub, this area that you can basically go anywhere. Once you figure out that the Star World exists, then you can kind of jump all over the map and do anything in order. You can beat the game in like 20 minutes. You can go from beginning of game to Bowser in 20 minutes because of the Star World. That didn't really exist in the NES version, so I don't think you're giving it enough credit for the things that it did advance. Like, yes, Super Mario 3 is a great game. It is a extremely good version of the first thing they built. But Super Mario World is just like, it was a leap forward into this new console, and it was the leap that console needed, the Super Nintendo. It's the thing that Nintendo could hold their hat on and be like, hey, we have this here. This is why you need to buy this new gray and purple box of ours, because you need to play Super Mario World.
I think one thing we don't give this game enough credit is the first stage. I think that whenever you play the first stage of a game, that sets the tone for everything. And from grabbing the shell, you knock down the enemies.
It's that first
but then you have
giant
Yoshi.
bullet bill. Or no, or even that one too, depending on which one you start at. That second you see that first giant bullet bill, you're like, oh, it's on now.
Yeah, whether you choose one stage or the other, it lets you know, oh, so this is the previous game that I played, but it is prettier, it is bigger, and there were rumors about Yoshi being playable or not in the previous Mario game, so here right off the bat, look, you have Yoshi, it changes the dynamic, you can swallow the different characters, there's the jumping point at the end, it's almost like a football field type of thing, so it does such a great job at presenting most of the things. There's the climbing part, but then the game, maybe it didn't evolve the Mario formula as a whole, but the game does evolve inside of it. The first world is super pretty, and you're thinking, this is way too easy, because the first world super is very simple, right? But then as you continue to go and the stages change, you go from a forest to a chocolate to the stars. Maybe you didn't even get to the stars because this isn't a Metroidvania game, but it does have some of those elements, especially in the ghost stages, which are very frustrating, I'm not going to lie. But the fact that you do have those small stages, it's like, hey, you think you got it all figured out, like you mentioned, Keith, guess what? Now it's all about checking out the doors. And you look at Mario Maker was made possible, or I think those levels in this game were incredibly influential for the reason of Mario Maker 2's and the first one's success. So Ryan, what did you think about that added element of the game starts in a very familiar format, but as you kept going, it did make you think, wow, not only is this relentless, but you do got to have a little bit of backtracking. I had a couple of parts where I forgot. Oh, wait a minute, I ended the stage, but I didn't unlock the next one. Oh, I needed to get the key, but in order to get the key, I can't be Small Mario because I got to break this block.
Yeah, I think that is, without question, the highlight of the game is discovering the alternate paths that you can take that either give you shortcuts, take you to the Star World, finding those hidden areas where you get like the yellow block, the blue block, the green block that make your experience in other levels easier or let you discover other alternate paths. So it gives you plenty to do outside of just standard platforming. They kind of have those bonus castles with like the dinosaurs and things like that. So you're definitely rewarded for going back and replaying a level in a different way, especially if you felt like, oh, there's something there, but you can't quite get to it yet. That's definitely the highlight of this game.
Absolutely. Now, talking about the art style, I remember that when I was a little one, people were very mixed about this because this game definitely catered more to kids. Just visually speaking, you look at Super Mario Bros. 3, and this one, I think 3 looks sharper. Obviously, it had less colors, so when you evolved, you looked at Yoshi, you looked at Mario, all of a sudden Mario is noticeably super happy, right? Where in the first games, he was more neutral. Then you have Luigi, you have all these different elements. When thinking about new Super Mario Brothers, the original ones, this one, the 3D ones, do you think that visually speaking, we're not talking about the platforming and the gameplay, is this your favorite one? If not, what do you look for visually in a Mario game?
2D, I would say it's my favorite one, but I do think that visually the 3D Mario games blow the 2D out of the water. Maybe that's just because of like graphical advancements and stuff, but the thing that separates it, like you said, was this color or this access to new colors that just makes the game just stick out more bright, more fun. And then when it needs to be, it adds more like a dark atmosphere when you're in a cave or in the ghost house, that like feeling of it's this very vast background that they've painted on this 2D plane inside the ghost house. I love that. And it just adds so much atmosphere. And that's the thing that the 3D games built on that I think just separates them and makes it better. If you look at something like a Super Mario Galaxy and just how fun and colorful it is with all the different planets, like the ice planet looks cold. The lava planets look like you would melt to death on that planet. God bless that plumber for not doing it, but just this palette of colors that Nintendo has just mastered is what makes the Mario games look so good.
It's my favorite art style as well because even though I don't play Mario Maker, I'm just not that much of a masochist, to be honest. I enjoy watching streamers and other people play Mario Maker, but
That's not that bad.
Yeah, I know I'd want to play like the super expert levels, even though I would suck at them. And I know I'd just be banging my head against the wall playing those levels over and over again. But what I was saying about Mario Maker is that was like the best way and easiest way for me to watch someone play those levels and just see all the art styles like in a very short amount of time. And I definitely love Super Mario World's art style the most because even looking at like, I don't like watching people play the new Super Mario Brothers like art style, like the 3D, the 3D with the 2D. I just don't like it. I would rather watch the NES or Super Nintendo ones.
Which brings me to another topic. The reason that I don't like the new Super Mario Brothers games, I love the 3D ones, like Super Mario 3D World. I've been playing that on the Wii U. Maybe one of my favorite Mario games of all time? I played enough hours where I think I can really have that conversation, but going back to New Super Mario Brothers, I feel like Blue's Clues should have sponsored that game because of its music. It was all like, and I can understand that.
I hate Nintendo in their new 3DS, new Super Mario Brothers. Like, I just come up with better names, guys. You're killing me. It's not new anymore, and just change it for
Ryan, have you ever considered buying a used copy of the old new Super Mario Brothers game?
Yeah, exactly. No, but it's the worst thing ever.
You have to make sure that you buy an old copy of new Super Mario Brothers U.
Oh, no.
Yeah, an old copy of new Super Mario Brothers U. I'm confusing myself. I can't even do it.
See, we can't even do that.
Oh, get new Super Mario Brothers, an old copy of New Super Mario Brothers 2 on your used new Nintendo 3DS.
The headaches are real. People, we apologize for any possible confusions, but blame Nintendo on that one. But talking about the music, where would you rank that with this? Because I feel like this is it. This game is so damn memorable that when in Super Mario Maker, we keep bringing it up because it's an example, like people have the playground to choose whichever Mario game they want, for the most part. You know, they don't have the galaxies, etc. But I think there's a reason they tend to go with World, and I think most of it has to do with the memorable music. So talk to me about that, and whether it is or not your favorite music in the Mario franchise.
I had literal chills roll down my neck when I finally got to Bowser and that music played. That might be my favorite piece of music in video games, and this is the best soundtrack, or one of the best, definitely the best Mario, and I got that same feeling in Mario Maker talking about the music and just how they made new music in the style of Super Mario World, and I just had a grin from ear to ear listening to that new stuff, but it just holds up so good, and I look forward to playing the new level in Super Mario World just to hear the different music, because they're really good about two levels like having different tracks behind each other, whether it be just a different atmosphere between the levels. That's a reason for it to have different music, but it's very rare that you hear the same piece of music twice in a row.
I felt my experience was actually quite different. I don't think it touches Super Mario 64 in terms of music. I mean, you can't beat Dire Dire Docks, man. That's just some good stuff right there.
Oh, burn Dire Dire Docks to the ground in comparison.
So, Super Mario World, I think the overworld, like level select music, I think that's fantastic. Each area feels different, but it kind of broke my brain when I realized that almost every song in a level has like the same jingle in it, and they just kind of like play around with it.
It's true.
So it kind of like broke me where I was like, they're just doing this like that's in every single level. If you look for it,
it's like a theme song. It's like a theme song where they have one tone.
I think it's cool, and it works better in some places than others. Like when I get to the underwater level, and I'm like, oh, it's kind of the same music, just slowed down. I'm like, I don't know if I'm a huge fan of that, but it works amazingly well in like the castle levels, because the castle level music is amazing. That's probably the best music in the game, in my opinion.
Is the boss fight horn the greatest instrument in video games? That that plays as you're fighting the Koopa Kids. Oh, it's so good.
I think that my favorite part of this that ties everything together from the music to the graphics is when you go to the castle, the stage doesn't just start. It's the fact that Mario looks up, and then if you have Yoshi,
you gotta drop Yoshi off.
Yeah, it's like Yoshi.
It's like this
things
is
are about
too
to happen,
real
man.
in here for
Yoshi,
you.
yeah,
You don't need to see what's
real.
about to happen.
You don't want to see what's gonna happen. Yeah.
Although, I mean, Mario's a bastard because we're talking about Super Mario World. We're talking about Yoshi. We got to bring this up. I mean, Yoshi.
Animal abuse?
We got to make a sacrifice, people. Sometimes things happen, whether you've done it or not. But I think it's hilarious that animal abuse is maybe introduced in video games with this game. So I think let's just talk about this for a quick second, Ryan. Anything you want to say about Yoshi and the fact that we need to appreciate that little dinosaur that much more?
Well, I love Yoshi because even if he gets hit, he starts running around and you actually have an opportunity to get him back. So that was very generous of them. But I didn't do it in this run, but I know that there is a secret level to get to a Star Worlds. It's like the bridge level before you get to the forest. That a good way to get the secret level is you basically float underneath the goalpost, ditch Yoshi, and you get to the area behind the goalpost thing, and then you can get to the secret area. So literally, you do have to sacrifice Yoshi to get to that level.
And even though it's awful, I love how the biggest revelation in Super Mario World in the last 10, 15 years is the fact that every time Yoshi opens its mouth is because Mario just pummeled him on the head.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Wow.
so dark.
I have played this game so many times, and not once did I think about that. I feel
the video version. I'm gonna
now.
have to do a super zoom to,
Yeah.
to see that. Yeah.
Somebody needs to call Mushroom Kingdom PETA on Mario because he's just abusing the hell out of this species to get his work just done, just throwing them in places, throwing them off cliffs, beating them in the back of the head so they'll eat things. Who knows if they actually want to eat those things and spit fire? Maybe Mario's a monster.
Is secretly Mario the bad guy in this game? Because if you really think about it, he's killing a bunch of animals, he's hitting Yoshi, he's letting him go, he's taking
and
animals
he's murdering
off the...
children. We don't know where the Koopas are in the hierarchy of the
that
Mushroom
mountain
Kingdom.
Needed a band-aid on it. All right, He hurt a mountain.
That's basically the equivalent of firing a missile, a non-sanctioned missile strike on the Mushroom Kingdom when he
knocking down castles.
Exactly. And did you actually take the time to read some of those things at the end of Castles? It almost sounds a little propaganda-like, where it's Mario justifying what he did, the sadistic Lemmy Koopa is no more, his days of torture are over. It's very propaganda-like.
He went into the castle. He's the one intruding. They're just
Exactly.
chilling in their castle.
It's justification. It's maybe unjust justification for these horrendous actions that Mario
he beat the
is
Koopa.
committing.
Does he really have to take the castle down with it?
Mm-hmm.
So are we saying that Super Mario World is maybe the best video game and also the worst, ethically speaking? Wow.
It's the brightest and the darkest video game all at the same time.
I don't even know where to go with this, except let's talk about the levels for a quick second. So when thinking about World, what was your favorite level or your favorite theme? Because that's one thing I love about this game, especially because of the graphical capabilities. When you go back to the Xbox 360 generation, most people's complaints were that games were very brown, they were very neutral, they were very monotone. But here's a game that every world is completely different. It gives you a different experience visually with the enemy variety. Which one was your favorite and why?
My favorite theme was the castle, just because it had such a good fortress feel, and it wasn't just the same thing. Sometimes you'd be in those lava areas, and then sometimes it felt like a dark cellar-like area where you would either go through the shifting platforms, but inside the style, It had such a different feel, and I think of the fortresses, even though it's the end of the game, my favorite one would be the Bowser Castle, because I remember as a kid, just the fact that it had branching paths and you can go whichever way you wanted just blew my damn mind. And to this day, it's like, wow, this is so cool.
Which route did you guys take in Bowser's Castle?
Oh god, what were the numbers? I don't remember the...
So I believe I went 2 and 7, I want to say. So 2 is the one where you climb the gates or whatever, like the fences where you punch the guys.
Okay, then I must have did 2 and 7.
The other one I went was it had the little stone statue Bowsers that like shot fire.
That's
so I
the
think
way
that
I
was
went.
7.
Things would go down. I did like 2 at the beginning once, and then I walked almost all the way to the end. I'm really bad at numbers, but
You
that
only
was
have
my
to do
combination.
2, right?
Yeah, you only have to do 2.
Okay, so I did one of the first ones, and then one of the last ones where the one where you punch the fence, and then the one where the things come down.
Can we just agree that the fences are the best part of that game? Because
they're
apparently
so
we all
cool.
took the fence, right? It's so awesome, and the fact you can
I
punch
feel
them
like
and flip
everyone
around.
takes, and the first room they take is 2 because it's super easy.
Yeah, and it's because it's right there, and I think the fences are just a cool way throughout the game, not just this one, where, wow, even though it's a 2D game, you're like on a different plane right now, and look at these characters walking by me, but they can't actually touch me and things
You can
like
punch
that.
them.
Yeah, you can be pretty awesome with that. So we've been talking about a lot of good things. Taking it first to you, Keith, what are maybe some not so great things about the game, whether because they don't hold up, maybe now that you've played, and this is in 2019, so we're not reviewing this game in 1991 when it came out. You've had numerous Mario games to play, including Mario Maker. So is there something about this game that you would prefer it change? Would you prefer it modified, or maybe that it kept more of an original formula like the first Mario games?
I think really the only critique that I would give this game is the auto-scroll levels, because I hate auto-scroll levels in every game, but there are times in that game where it just really messes up the pace of the game, where you get a good flow going and you have you're feeling this fast pace, then all of a sudden, boom, you hit an auto scroll level, and now you're just forced to slow and go slow and just kind of creep along that front edge of the screen as you slowly make your way through the level. It just doesn't feel good and almost kind of goes against the overall feel of the game. If there's one thing I would change, that's it. But I feel like that's a pretty nitpick critique of that game, because it's perfect.
I mean, come on, and let's call out the most obvious one is just the archaic save system of, I have to beat a ghost house or a castle to save. And the truth is, you're just going to go back to a ghost house you know how to beat every time you want to save. So you have to like trek back and forth through the worlds, because I'm meticulous about saving the game. So if they put in a system where you can replay a level to save, why not just let you be able to save anytime you want? Because I'm just going to go back, like I said.
First time that was able to happen.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying we're talking about this from a 2019 perspective. I'm saying that's definitely the thing that feels outdated. The only other thing other than that would be maybe put another top secret area power up kind of station.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I can get behind
it was annoying
that.
to like double back all the way to get your power ups, but that top secret area, I love it. I love it. Get unlimited lives, all that stuff. Juan, did you do it? Did you get the top secret area?
Nope.
I knew it. I knew you were going to miss it. It's a beautiful thing. You get all your power.
Beautiful.
It's literally all the level is power-ups. You get a Yoshi, mushrooms, the cape, and you can keep going back over and over again and just get all the one-ups you could ever dream of. So
Like, at least
get
for
that
me,
next time.
I think I had a fairly traditional run where, and this is just me as a gamer, I never strive for 100% completion in games. I strive for ending the game, as in I got to the last thing in the game. It technically has the end on the screen, and I see credits, and that to me is like a good experience. So I know that many people go back to this and get every single nook and cranny. They go and explore every single thing. There are very few games where I've ever done that, because for me, I just like to be able to experience it for a little while. And talking about things and it's not bad, but just objectively speaking, I feel like visually, I love how this game looks in comparison to 3, but I think the level design in 3 is better than this game. Because I can tell you and I can remember what the level looks like visually with World, but I can remember a lot more level layouts in 3. And I hope that makes sense. I think that when I think about the ship, when I think about most of the levels, I remember like this part that you jump, this enemy comes out, because I feel the placement was better. Or maybe with this game, they sacrificed that more for, hey, look at how pretty this looks. Like the dinosaurs in this game, I forgot they existed. And honestly, I don't think they really added anything other than, hey, look, there's more enemies.
You forget it's supposed to be this dinosaur world because you see him a little at the beginning and then you see him a little bit at the end, and it doesn't feel like they're a huge part of it. There's definitely also a flaw with kind of the capability. It's really cool and it's really fun, but you can like cheese the crap out of this game with the capability.
Oh, it feels so good.
Yeah, like there was one level in the Forest of Illusion where you're supposed to be on the platforms that like sway back and forth. But if you get the jump just right at the very beginning, you can literally like do your little wee like cape float all the way through the entire level.
Keith, remember to clip that Ryan wee or something.
I'll put that in my little vault. Yep.
So, maybe the biggest thing, I think that now in 2019, we talk about remasters and remakes and compilations. Objectively speaking, I think that the Super Nintendo, in the very same generation that this game came out on, we got maybe one of the best compilations because we got the first Super Mario All-Stars, which included the first Mario 3 Lost Levels. It had an incredible variety, but at some points they said, you know what? We're just going to put this game in.
We're going to put more.
Objectively, that was already maybe one of the best compilations, especially considering we got the Lost Levels, which is the real, Super Mario 2 in contrast to the one that we got in North America. How incredible do you think that All-Stars packages, and including World, is that objectively one of the best compilation, not discs, cartridges out there?
If not the best, absolutely. In my mind, there's two that you could argue that are the best. It is that package, the Super Mario All-Star Super Mario World, because you have 4 of the best games ever made and Super Mario The Lost Levels all in one package. It's that and Sonic's Ultimate Genesis Collection for the PS3, which is just a great game of that entire, like,
what about
a great
Rare Replay.
Rare Replay's all right.
That one's good.
It's
the
up there.
presentation
but
of that one.
the presentation is great, but I just don't think Rare made some real good games. Rare made some of the best games ever. I just don't think that the overall start to finish quality hangs with those two packages. And it's funny how it's basically the greatest hits of those two generations that
if they
put
could get
head-to-head.
every Rare game on Rare Replay, it probably would have been a lot better, but they couldn't get everything.
Yeah,
Call
because
a
when you
spade a
talk about
spade.
that,
If they
But
could
wait a
GoldenEye.
second.
If they could get GoldenEye on Rare Replay, it would be a much better
GoldenEye,
package.
and I don't think DK64 was on there, although that's not the best. But so you're telling me there was a Super Mario All-Stars that also had Super Mario World? Was that the Wii? Was that the Wii? Like
No,
re-release?
that was
It was
actually
a Super Nintendo game. It was a very
was
late.
that always on it? Oh, it was later. Okay.
Yeah, it was a late one. Because at first they released All-Stars, and then they're like, you know what? We gave World away anyway for free. Throw it on the All-Stars. We got room on this cart. We're crazy. We're Nintendo. Woo!
I remember in school, and this is so stupid, some kids judge others based on which version of All-Stars. Because if you got the later one, that was an indication of, oh, you're one of them late Nintendo adopters. If you had the first one, it's like, okay, you're cool. So you've had the Super Nintendo for a while.
You're OG, man.
Exactly. The OG Super Nintendo. So not that OG, but man.
Then you're
talking
like,
about
boy,
this
I
game,
had a Famicom. What?
yeah, why not? Why not? But why do you guys think Super Mario World is something that is so revered? What is the one takeaway? We've talked about almost every detail in a general sense. Why do people in Mario Maker and countless YouTube channels, retrospective podcasts, the Super Nintendo is packed because you have A Link to the Past, which is literally our first podcast episode. And I feel like now with this game, we have the essentials, and maybe eventually, Ryan, we got to get to DKC. I know we got to get to that. We'll do that. But why this game? Why is it so damn good and so memorable?
I honestly don't think you can chalk it up to one thing. It's a combination of feel plus nostalgia. Like, it is, to this day, and I will argue this to my dying breath, it is one of the best feeling games ever. The controls are just so tight, and that's what makes it better than all of the other platformers. Like, you have to compare this game against the other platformers of that era, your Bubsies, your Earthworm Jims, your Boogermans, even your Sonic the Hedgehog. Nothing felt as good as Super Mario World, and it holds up
that
today.
last one.
Yeah, what? The Sonic the Hedgehogs?
Yeah.
It's true. You know what? Maybe it's just me. I don't like the
It felt better than
floatiness.
Sonic 1. Sonic 2 definitely felt a lot better.
Yeah,
in
Sonic
my
Sonic
opinion.
3 is the best in my opinion, but I still don't think it plays anywhere as good as Super Mario World. It's just not on that level. So it's that amazing feel of the game chalked up with a generation's worth of nostalgia. I don't think Super Mario World would be as revered as it is today if it wasn't the pack-in game for the Super Nintendo. Like, we love to tell stories about that Christmas morning, and our generation loves to tell stories about that Christmas morning where you opened up that Super Nintendo, you got that new console, and Super Mario World was waiting there for you, ready to be played. And a lot of people's first memories with a Super Nintendo came with Super Mario World, so there's definitely a layer of nostalgia that comes along with it that just makes it like this perfect storm of a video game, especially for our generation.
So for me, I would say that Super Mario World, I think, is certainly a game that a lot of people love. But when you kind of look through, YouTube video essays and the history of Mario, I feel like it's actually not often really that talked about in comparison to, like I said, Mario 3 and Mario 64, just because from a history perspective, it didn't have these groundbreaking, noticeable changes that, at least at the surface level. When you go deeper, you can definitely see a lot of improvements over Mario 3. But it is just, like I said before, it's an extremely solid platformer that has aged beautifully. It's just as playable now as it was then, aside from just the stupid little save thing that's really, at worst, a minor inconvenience. It's not my favorite platformer on Super Nintendo because I love the DKC series. I think the music and atmosphere, and I just love the flow of the DKC games. That's just a preference. That's nothing against Mario. It's just a matter of, what you appreciate more in a game. It's just overall a fantastic experience. Quick story, because when I think of this game, for some reason at my old house when I was, probably still in elementary school, we just had this old CRT TV that we didn't use but had no idea what to do with it. And this was already by like N64 era or whatever. So that TV just sat under a table in our dining room that we never really used unless we had guests over. So there was just this stupid CRT TV under a table. For some reason, during a summer when I was really bored, I decided to hook my Super Nintendo up to that TV under the dining room table, and I proceeded to play through all of Super Mario World throughout the summer, including beating the Star World and the Special World, sitting up against like this big hutch, playing Super Nintendo under a dining room table. So there you go. There's my love and memory of this game.
I think there was
That's good
something
stuff
for
right
most
there.
kids that even though you could play things on a big TV, because it happened to me as well. I had a big TV that I could play games at, but I had the small 13-inch TV that I would have in a corner, and that was like my gaming corner. That was like my like my hut, and it was just so
you
cool
make
to
your
have
little
that.
your gaming for it, you
Yep.
know.
So the last thing that I want to talk about here is that Super Mario World is technically the first Mario game in the console, but it wasn't up until Yoshi's Island that we technically got a Mario World game that you have to buy, right? At least in our region. This was the first Mario game that people were going to be buying, and this is not going to be a review of Yoshi's Island, but I just want to get quick reaction about the two obvious things. One of them is the graphical changes. This game is drastically different. It's still 2D. It's still a platformer, but aside from that, this game is beautiful, but it is very different. And maybe it goes even deeper into like a more mainstream appeal. And then the other thing is the gameplay. This game is a prequel, so it's about Baby Mario, and Yoshi now takes the main stage, right? And it's about making sure Mario is not taken away. Personally, I just want to say, I thought it was okay, but it was definitely not what I look for in a Mario game. What about you guys?
So with this one, the art style is absolutely awesome, and I do really love it. And I was actually very surprised because as a kid, I was very much like you, Juan, where I was like, oh, it's kind of a fun game, but that's that game with the annoying baby Mario that's always crying. It's like, yeah. And you're just like, I hate this. I hate Mario. Why are you making me hate Mario? Years later, just reading different video game reviews and different things on Mario games, I was surprised at how many people said, this is like the pinnacle of Mario. Yoshi's Island is the best Mario game. I was really surprised. And honestly, I haven't gone back to really give it the old college try and come in with an open mind and see if I really do like that game. So that's something we might have to look at down the line, because I didn't see it as a kid, but maybe I'll see it differently today.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you there, where I think that Yoshi's Island is a fine game. It is not the best game by a long shot, and I do enjoy the atmosphere and look of it. I think everything that I said about how Mario really just masters color, they took to the entirely next level on Yoshi's Island. But I remember not liking the gameplay all that much, the whole egg mechanic system, and really like I kind of find that shocking that people consider that the pinnacle of Super Mario games, especially in 2019. I don't see that. But thinking about Yoshi's Island now and all of the stuff that those Yoshis put Baby Mario through, maybe I understand the abusiveness a little more. Makes a little more sense.
Wow.
If it's a prequel. If it's a prequel.
Justify abuse.
Yeah. Well, we're just saying maybe that's what led to some things, but I think it's just a matter of, it's a great game, but you're calling it Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island. If it was Yoshi's Island, that would have been a completely different thing, because this game did get a sequel, Yoshi's Story, on the Nintendo 64, but that became its own game. The title was Yoshi's Story, so people's like, okay, got it, And then we got games we still have.
Where does Yoshi's Cookie fall into all this?
I have no idea, but I'm a big fan of Tetris Attack. It has nothing to do really with Mario, but
it really is.
Oh man. So just to quickly cap off, just in case you're wondering, some of the Mario games that did come out for the Super Nintendo, we got Super Mario RPG, developed by Squaresoft, an incredible role-playing game, one of the best of all time, and people still talk about that. Super Mario World, Mario's Time Machine. I hope to never review that on the podcast.
I've not heard.
No, we're
things.
We're gonna do a 1-2 punch of that, and Mario's missing. You just wait.
Mario's missing. One of my worst rentals. One of my worst rentals all time.
I think I rented it.
That?
Yeah, I think I rented it like 4 times and still don't know how to play this game.
It's like Mario walking by things, but he can't knock it off. You got Yoshi's Island, obviously Super Mario Kart, and the variety of the NES games that came as a result of the compilation. So as we close off, if you were to pick, it can happen, maybe it doesn't, but if you were to pick the next Mario game that you would like to review, whether it be in one day or one decade, which one would it be and why?
I would probably pick Yoshi's Island, Super Mario Bros. 2 Yoshi's Island, for those exact reasons I mentioned earlier. People revere this game, and like I said, I haven't come back to this game as an adult with a more open mind to give it a chance.
I think the one I would have to pick is Super Mario Galaxy, because I finally want to go to war and prove that it is a better game than Super Mario 64, that objectively better across the board.
I never actually completed Galaxy or Galaxy 2. I started Galaxy and then I had to give it back to someone, but I was really enjoying it, so that might be a good one to look at too.
Guys, I have a confession to make. I've never played Super Mario Galaxy.
You know what? That's okay. I think even though it's a great game, Super Mario Galaxy is underrated because of the platform that it was on. Like, yes, the Wii is an extremely successful console, but when you think about tight platforming, you don't really think about the Nintendo Wii. So it puts Super Mario Galaxy in this weird place, but they managed to pull it off, and the world needs to know.
Yeah, but for everybody watching and listening, let us know, number one, which is your favorite Mario game? Reach out to us on social media, A Cast of the Past on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can send us an email to acastofthepast@gmail.com. We also have a pretty awesome Discord, which is acastofthepast.com/Discord. It's a chat app. You can download it for free on iOS, Android devices. You can use it on your computer.
And you can chat with us anytime. Like, if you want to ask me a question on a Tuesday morning, I'll probably answer you on Tuesday afternoon.
But he'll answer you, and he never does that on social media. So at least, hey, you get Keith somewhere. But then the other thing is, which Mario game would you guys and gals like us to review? I think that the fact that there's so many of them now. I've been playing Super Mario 3D World. We talked about Galaxy. I feel Sunshine is a game that I eventually need to play, because I remember I bought it when it came out, and that was one of those games where I was like, I paid money for this. I better like it. And I kept telling myself that. And I think even to this day, where people maybe go back to Yoshi's Island and think about it fondly.
It's not as bad. I haven't played it in a while, but me and my buddy, we did go back and beat it, and it's not as bad as I remembered.
I would say Super Mario Sunshine is the worst Mario game. Worst mainline Mario game. Like, Mario is Missing doesn't count in this conversation.
Yeah,
but
no.
Sunshine is garbage. The garbage that you should be cleaning up in Mario Sunshine is the game itself. Just pour waterboard it, and then just send it to sea.
Mario's done everything. He's cleaned up things. He's gone to space. So let us know which Mario game you'd like us to review in the future. Really important, if this is your first podcast episode that you're checking out from A Cast of the Past, first of all, welcome. Maybe subscribe to the channel, leave a 5-star review. But our previous episode, Ryan and me sat down and 5-star sucker, talking about Booker T, because we're wrestling fans. We eventually do wrestling reviews. But in the previous episode, we talked about just sort of the podcast format. We review video games, but also review movies. And an idea we sort of threw out there was perhaps reviewing movie trilogies. So even though this isn't a podcast to talk about that, I feel because Keith is here, just some quick reactions, having edited the audio version of that one. What do you think about the movie trilogy stuff? And for those that are watching for the first time or listening, here's your chance to know a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, to really just do a deep dive on a trilogy, or even just like a set of movies. It doesn't have to be 3. Like, if you have, like, say you wanted to go through, and you really hate yourself, you wanted to go through all the Terminator movies and just enjoy the steady decline of the quality in those movies.
It's pretty accurate.
I do think that there's merit in that. And, you know, the thing that I love most about this podcast is it has a very book club feel to it. I like it how it's our own little like book club that we get to share to the world, where we play or review a piece of content and just have a discussion about it and get to know everybody's thoughts, whether they agree and disagree with us. This trilogy angle really takes that to like its natural place, where now you're sitting down, you're not just reviewing one movie. It's something that you guys talked about in that previous episode. Like, we've done an episode on Toy Story, where we just did Toy Story 1. If we didn't approach this, who knows when we do 2. Even though when I watched Toy Story, I ended up sitting down and watching all 3 movies just because I love them. Who knows when we're going to get to Toy Story 2 again, because there's only so many weeks in a year. Can only cover so many things, but this gives us a reason to just really hunker down and just consume something for what it's
Hunker
worth.
down, man.
Hunker down,
down.
baby. And you guys didn't really touch on it, but I'd like to present also extending this idea to games. Like Ryan talked about how much he loves Donkey Kong Country for the SNES. Well, there's 3 of those. Even though it's a bit more work than watching 3 movies, I do think that there's merit in like tackling Donkey Kong Country 1, 2, and 3 all together as the complete Super Nintendo Donkey Kong Country experience. I think that there's outlets outside of movies that we can explore with that, and it's really exciting to do so. This is basically my way of saying one day you will be playing the entire Mass Effect trilogy, because it is the best version of this example.
Yeah, no, and
Why,
absolutely. I think that with this podcast, you talked about the book club feel. Once again, just as a quick catch up, that's what kind of led to the development of this podcast. And the idea is that, say we do a video game review, it's not that we're going to do one podcast episode reviewing all 3 of them, because I feel like we'd have to cut down a lot of time. So we'd have to like really overly summarize, right? But the fact that we can say in January, we say, hey, in this year, we're going to review the DKC trilogy. So you know that by the time December rolls out, we will have theoretically reviewed that. Same thing with movies. It's not like it's going to happen with every single game, but we can at least tell you, hey, here's a project. For this year, it's going to be a DKC. Maybe it can be a variety of other things. I talked about this with you guys before the podcast. Like eventually, maybe we review video game compilations. We talked about All-Stars. It's not that we have to play each one to completion, because a lot of times we have, right? These are older games, but we can review the Sega Genesis Classics collection on the PS4, be like, do you think that this is
every single game?
Beat all of them,
yeah.
and review them in an hour.
A great example of that is, even though like I never owned a Sega Genesis, like I said, but the friends that I did know that had a Sega Genesis, just Sonic the Hedgehog wasn't the game they owned. It was that 9-pack that came with the Sega Genesis that was like Sonic, Golden Axe, Columns, and whatever else was on there. Like, in my opinion,
they're still reselling it to this day.
Exactly. Like that is the most important Genesis game, opposed to just Sonic the Hedgehog. Like, that is the thing that's worth covering if we're going down that Genesis hole.
So that's what this is all about. So once again, don't be afraid to reach out to us, especially on the Discord, which is when we tend to announce perhaps future episodes. We don't do that right now on the podcast because we want to be able to be flexible. So if somebody recommends something, that's what happens there. But I love talking about Super Mario World. Let us know what you thought about it. And up until next time, I'm so happy we get to do this properly, Ryan. Keith, are you ready? Are you ready, Keith?
Apparently not. I'm choking to death.
He's not.
Okay, no,
He's choking.
He's choked up. I'm not ready on
choked.
this. Okay.
Keith choked.
Hold
I
on.
know you're emotional.
Let me
buddy.
take a sip out of my pink Mickey Mouse cup.
Do that. And up until next time, we'll be back with another exciting episode of A Cast
To the
Past.
Thanks for listening,
did.
everybody. Keith, welcome back.
Keith
Thank you.
choked. He choked.
I did.
No, Keith.
Where's Mom's spaghetti?